It's time for another 16-bit superheroes, and this one is all about the death and return of Superman, which came out for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis back in 1994. And just to get you a recap, I'm doing this because I've realized in my recent love of superhero games like the Arkham series and Insomniac Spider-Man, there were plenty of classic superhero titles that I never got a chance to play, so I've gotten on a kick on collecting 16-bit cartridges for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Death and Return of Superman is one of those. I picked this up for the Super Nintendo. I don't know if it's better than the Genesis version or not. I just saw it and I picked it up. Always wanted to play this game, and I think I probably did rent it or touch it or play it in a store or something. It stars the mulleted Superman, and it splits off into a bunch of other different types of Supermen. Radicator, Steel, Superboy, all in the costumes. If you guys remember in the mid-90s, there was that huge comic phenomenon where they killed Superman, and then he came back as a bunch of derivatives and kind of split versions of himself. Then, of course, the real Superman came back to life afterwards, as they always do in the comic books. Well, this game kind of follows that storyline. You start off as the traditional Superman, punching and kicking and heat visioning all kinds of kind of generic bad guys at the top of the game. You eventually get killed by Doomsday, and that's when all hell breaks loose and all of these other different Supermen start appearing, and the game splits up from level to level as you play as each of these different characters. They all have the same kinds of abilities. It's really a beat-em-up, this game. But because you get all of these different Superman characters, it's fun to re-explore this. They've done a pretty good job at kind of encapsulating the comic book, even though contextually it doesn't really make sense. Like, they've really neutered Superman and his abilities. He's not that invincible, but they've never really been able to nail Superman's abilities in any video game, so why should one from 1994 be that different? For example, flight doesn't really help you all that much, although there are some kind of mini levels where you are flying and it's like a space shooter and you're blasting with your heat vision. It's kind of fun. The fact that you get to bounce around and play as Superboy and play as the Eradicator and play as Steel and, you know, all of these different variations makes the game kind of addictive. And the combat's pretty fun. You got the standard punch and kick and throw moves, and then you've got a sort of an ultimate move that you can pull off as well. I enjoyed bouncing through these levels and playing these different Superman characters. There are so many fantastic beat-em-ups on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis that it's really hard to say that this stands with the best of them, but there definitely is some allure here because it does a decent enough job of kind of propping up what was created for us in the comic book. I had a pretty good time with Death and Return of Superman. It's an okay title, and the way that I'm scoring these games is not through the lens of nostalgia. It's not how I felt back then, because I think the game was kind of trashed when it came out originally, because we were already starting to move on to much better titles. But when you play games like this in a modern setting and through the lens of today, you can certainly feel that there is charm here, and that is absolutely the case with the Death and Return of Superman. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.